Good afternoon. How are you guys doing? Good? Good. Still a little sleepy after lunch maybe, but it's been a pretty good conference so far. I've seen some pretty good sessions. Thank you guys for coming and being willing to look at a subject matter that has evaded me for quite some time. But once I started figuring it out, I figured I really wish I had a session at a conference that just like told this to me in about an hour, saved me time and all the effort. So this is my love letter to you guys, that I decided to just put all my research in a deck and go through the things I've learned. This is absolutely open to questions if you'd like. But as we go, you might find some answers, so try to hold them for the end. Sound good? Awesome. All right, so let's start out with the way that I usually introduce myself. Saying usually is how I do it now, okay? Hello, my name is Heather Downing. I do lots of things and stuff. Clearly you can see by how nicely everything is laid out that I have a professional photograph that was taken like 10 years ago, and lots of details about what it is I do, right? But really, when people think about me, it isn't in such detail. It's usually done very concisely, very simply, because humans don't think about all those details when they think about a person. What comes to mind, usually, are things like, oh, that person is innovative. That person I associate with enterprise space, like something with big companies, right? Enterprise. I associate them with some sort of consumer-facing role. And I associate them maybe with, I don't know, if this would work, there we go. That this person is, please, do a speaker. I've done this before. And those are a lot more singular. But yet, when we write a resume and when we put our LinkedIn together, it is exhausting to read your all stuff. It just really is. Because human beings are not computers. We make them to look after the things that we don't want to remember, okay? So when we communicate digitally, verbally, see how concise and simple you can go. So now that we have that introduction, isn't that a lot easier to remember? A lot easier. Make things simple. But the real question is, what are you wanting out of your career? Like, what do you really want? Research confirms that there's a real disconnect between your performance and your job outcome. Very huge disconnect. You could be the hardest working developer out there, and nobody notices you. This was me. I know it's funny. I look funny. Normally, it would be a situation where people are like, notice me only because of the weird hair colors I have or what I'm wearing that doesn't quite fit in. But that's not the right kind of noticing. Like, I usually just said, yeah, thanks for not crashing that app. Thanks for not doing that. But that's pretty much the interaction that I got. And I really wanted to know why other people were getting promoted before me. Now, there's a lot of factors that go into this, but this is also something that a lot of my really good, talented friends were also facing. So while you could say, oh, it was because of this or that reason, and you can justify it any way you want, I didn't want to feel helpless, right? If you're too busy keeping your head down and your nose to the grindstone, it's harder to see you. Part of managing yourself and your trajectory means you have to make it easier for people to find opportunities for you, okay? If you get coy or bashful about your accomplishments, it does both yourself and your work a huge disservice, okay? It may unintentionally make the job of managing you even harder, ironically, which is interesting because I was raised that we just never talk about ourselves. We don't talk about things we've done. We don't want to come across as prideful or bragging. But the reality is, while we always need more developers, there's still a lot of developers. There's a lot. How do you stand out, right? This was a really big question I had early on. That guy you see getting promoted that was a total idiot in your brain, that's because he's doing shameless self-promotion all the time. All the time. He's never out of sight, never out of mind. So you should do the same thing, only there's a much more refined way of being in somebody's mind, okay? You don't need to lose self-respect in the process. You don't need to put on a clown suit, but you have to realize that your voice is important in this. Sent does not mean received is quite a profound thing. Half of your job is doing your work, and the other half of your job is communicating that it's been done, right? Because if you do it and I don't hear about it, do I know what's going on? Not really, not really. So when you do things, tell people about it. I just look at this as a simple transaction. I am a vocal log of the things I have done, okay? We miss out when we wrongly assume that other people will know about your work and all of our great work without having to tell them. It'll just be obvious, right? Because believing that pointing to your achievements is being overly self-promotional and that good work should be enough on its own is ironically very selfish. Because you must think it's all about you if people are just going to notice all the time, okay? You are almost always on your mind, but that goes for everyone else too, okay? Most everyone is busy with their own concerns and their plans and their problems and their lives. There's too much going on. Even when I went into the mall that's adjacent to this hotel the other day, there was so many options that as I was just looking for the one thing I was looking for, which is a hair curling iron, I actually forgot how much the prices were of the ones I just passed, the ones I just saw right then, because there were so many of them. So when you are a manager or somebody that has a powerful role, you deal with so many people and so many situations at the same time, you cannot really recall unless it was a very powerful memory. And so somebody would argue with me saying, well, as long as what you're doing, that is great work, is a powerful memory, you shouldn't have to say anything. Okay, sure, but never assume that your manager has a good memory. I certainly don't. I have a very small cache in the side of this head, very small. So try to do them a favor and tell them. There are some habits of developers I've noticed that are well known in the industry that are always in their mind. The good news is that becoming a super employee is not some sort of rarefied secret. It's a combination of skill set and mindset, okay? You can begin to develop that for yourself by focusing on some key habits, okay? And because I like to create new neural pathways in my brain that will just subconsciously do these things for me, I decided to put them in a deck for you. The first one is to pay attention to what other people value. Super employees are always studying the preferences and the goals of their direct supervisors. Their supervisors, and the company at large. They actually take interest in what the heck their company does, okay? They're doing things above and beyond what other employees are doing, and they're showing interest in it. They're motivated in showing that they want to learn what it's like to be at the top and in the front, okay? The result of paying attention is being able to discern what needs to be done and take action on it without being asked. That's when you become really valuable. Because remember, there's the manager and the director just trying to keep all the ducks in the row. If you can assist with some of those ducks being in a row, the relief of that is very noticeable. And you can do that at any level, paying attention to more than just what your job is, right? Another habit I noticed is that they choose the right place for their talents. It's really hard to be a super employee if the company's needs are very different from your abilities. I went through this many times. I'm like, well, I just really want to make a good salary. And that's totally fair, by the way. You're allowed to have that be the number one priority. But if my talent lied in proof of concept and innovation work, but I worked for a legacy application company, maybe that would not be something that would make me want to get up in the morning, okay? So I found that over time, my motivation would just kind of wane. And that's definitely not going to make you be noticed, right? A 2015 report by the Cicero Group in the USA found that one of the most important factors in employees consistently producing great work was recognition. Big surprise. 37% of the responders said that being recognized by a manager or by the company was the most important factor in the happiness and therefore the driver in the great work that was produced. So choosing where to work is very important. They also focus on the big picture thinking. Now this is starting to sound exhausting, right? But I'm assuming, since all of you are here with me, instead of going to a technical talk, which I'm giving, by the way, a little bit later, that you're interested in being noticed and in being heads above the rest, right? Otherwise, why would you give me your time? So we're just going to cross that off the list and assume you're all motivated, right? You're all motivated. Exceptional performers are able to maintain dual focus on the task at hand as well as how it fits into the bigger picture. If they don't understand something, they get the information they need to make its importance clearer. In addition, they also are able to better prioritize so that their activities and energy are focused where they are the most value to the company. This is where it got really tough for me because I wasn't exactly sure if I had permission to do that kind of thing. Like, if it isn't my role, I mean, am I allowed to be in board meetings? Am I allowed to know about this? I'm not talking about going outside of your reporting structure, but you could definitely be helpful. You can always be right on the fringe and be asking lots of questions. One of my favorite things to do is in my one-on-one with my manager is to ask, what can I do to help us get more work in the company? Because I notice it's slow right now. Or is there any way I could maybe go out on a sales call? And that sounds kind of strange, but having a technical person on a sales call is actually very helpful. And while you might not be the role, just say, I'd like to be a fly on the wall so I can understand, how to prioritize my work. And maybe you might have someone dictate, work on this ticket today, okay? Work on this other one tomorrow whenever you're done with it. That's great, but that's your opportunity to say, sure, but hey, I know that this one piece is actually a little bit more important to our clients, so I'm going to do that first to make sure that we've got it in the bag. All that's doing right there in just one sentence, they can say yes or no, it shows them that you actually care about the bottom line for the company, okay? That gets noticed. They're also comfortable with being uncomfortable. This is probably one of my best lessons over the past year. You have to be working on things that are difficult for you. Difficult, not fun, difficult. Because even if you are completely distraction-free and getting a lot of coding hours in, if you're just building the same app over and over again, that's not necessarily stretching you to the boundaries of your skills. And you cannot blame your company for that. That's up to you. And because you guys are all here, you get 10 points to Gryffindor for being here to learn new skills, right? Very, very cool. But if you're not deliberately stretching yourself, you may not be trying to structure skills in the direction that will actually help you grow as a technical contributor. That was the biggest differentiator that I noticed in my everyday job, was anybody who took the time independently to educate themselves on something and then share it. Sharing gives you two things. Sharing allows you to regurgitate what you've learned and therefore strengthen it because you had to teach someone else. It also allows you to be visible in your external growth. Because even if you're not working on anything related to AI, if you read something about it and you want to just talk about it on lunch break or whatever you want to do, it demonstrates that you care and you are a top performer. So there is no downside to doing this kind of a thing. And they like their colleagues. This was hard for me, okay? I am very happy to be here, and I genuinely care about all people now, but that was not the case in the beginning, okay? Definitely had a hard time with this. Not everybody likes me. I'm kind of high energy, I'm kind of weird. So a lot of the quieter developers really just didn't want to be in the same room with me, and that's fair. And I just kind of started resenting them for not being more open. But high performers are in tune with the people around them, and they can sense when they need something or don't need that. They possess soft skills like empathy, which is learnable, by the way. You're not born with it, you get to learn it. And you're able to relate well to other people because you take the time and the effort to understand them, all of them. Yes, even the jerk. You take the time to understand why do they do what they do. You know how we debug code? You can debug people. Why is this not working? This communication is just not working. I guess they just hate me because of this, or don't like me because of that, or I just don't like this guy because he's annoying. Yes, that is a symptom of the problem. Be a detective. Be a people detective. A high performer will put the human first and seek the connection, and only then can there be trust. And this becomes really, really important down the line. All of those full rooms that you see at really large conferences, like keynote opening people, have a lot of trust and respect in the industry because they also sought a connection outside of just their technical abilities. There's a great quote by Simon Sinek, is that empathy is being concerned about the human and not just their output, which is very difficult if you chose a career to not be, at front of the house in a hotel, talking to people. You wanted to just be you and the computer. It can be difficult, but this is very important because what do you guys all want to be? You want to be visible. You want to be noticed. You want to be considered a top performer. This is just an additional skill that will become more and more important as you rise. Every person needs to be seen, understood, and validated. All of us need it. You can dismiss someone who disagrees with you, or you could try to figure out why they say what they say and why they do what they do. This was so difficult for me, but slowly I started getting the hang of it. High performers also pay attention to what other people value. I think we talked about that before, right? These developers are studying the preferences and goals of their direct supervisors and going above and beyond. So, when do you have time to do your own work? Seems like this is a whole other second job just to keep growing. But you can actually work this into things day by day. You need to think about how to become a trusted voice. So there's two pieces to this. I don't have to tell you that you have to kind of know a little bit, I didn't say everything, a little bit about what you're doing. So if you talk about, like for instance, I don't know a heck of a lot about security, but I probably could go up here and say you shouldn't use repeated passwords on the internet. You should trust me, right? Well, that's pretty much common knowledge, so I'm not going to be a trusted voice on that subject the way that maybe one of the other security advisors would. So I kind of got to look at it a little bit more. Again, you don't have to be the expert, but you have to demonstrate that you actually put enough time into getting your answer and you have a reason for why you grabbed it. And I know that this all seems like it's obvious to some of you, but it wasn't to me. I don't people naturally, so I've had to learn how to do this. It was really hard for me because I felt like I was acting, It felt like I was on some sort of television show and I had to pretend to like everybody. You don't have to be a schmoozer, just engage and be positive and respectful. This was also hard for me because I'm very sarcastic and I come from a long line of people who love to complain. So I had to alter in my brain my personality in order to do this. I don't want to do that. I want to be me. People should just accept me for me, darn it. But the reality is, life is exhausting. Don't exhaust people more with your attitude, okay? Schmoozing, though, is a turnoff. Instead, you have to demonstrate leadership and also positively and never negatively engage with your peers and colleagues outside of your small group, okay? You can be critical as needed, but you always have to be positive. I know you probably didn't get a lot of sleep last night or you're really frustrated about a subject, but you have to put a positive spin on the way you present something or people are not going to take it, okay? Naked criticism will get you worse than nowhere. It'll get you in the cellar, okay? Your peers' feedback, even if it's just informal and word of mouth, it's critical to your promotion. There is a really good chart that kind of indicates the growth of this kind of exchange, this kind of trust, this kind of connection, for lack of a better term, okay? We're going to look at the way that this is set up. Has anybody seen this matrix before? A couple of you? Good. All right. Most of you never seen this. Awesome. I'm your first introduction. There's an excellent book called Radical Candor that all of you should read. We're going to start with the first one, obnoxious aggression. Think about all the trolls on Stack Overflow. Okay? Yeah? If you do this for them, then you have to be willing to encourage them to do this for you, right? That's what radical candor is. Unfortunately, the trolls online may be right in their statement, like, yes, you know, why that isn't really the question you're asking. What you really need to figure out is how to be a developer, and then come back and ask your question. Like, that is one of the most common responses I read, and I'm like, well, that's not helpful to anybody, even if they're right. Even if they're right, maybe this person does need a little bit more. You can't be obnoxiously aggressive to someone that doesn't trust you, doesn't know you, has no rapport with you. It doesn't work. You just look like a jerk, even if you're the right jerk, and no one wants to work with you. That's not how you rise to the top. And the next one over here is manipulative insincerity, okay? This is really tough for me, okay? This is where you get a lot of the passive-aggressive, oh yeah, we're totally doing this for you. Yeah, we totally care about you. You know, we're just gonna document this. You know, just to have it on file. You know, that's that manipulative insincerity. Okay, we're just manipulating your emotions to try to get you out the door, and that's not how you build trust. The other one is kind of interesting to me. Ruinous empathy. Has anybody here watched Friends, like the television show, ever before? There is a famous episode in which one of the characters takes up playing the piano and singing, okay? And one of their roommates wants to be supportive, but so really goes all out and say, oh, you sound amazing, that was amazing, that was incredible. And so the character that was playing, who's clearly not amazing and was quite off key, was like, really? That's great. Signed up for an entire performance in front of a huge audience. And then ended up getting very embarrassed by the whole situation because people booed them off stage, right? So you don't want to be that. You don't want to not be truthful. There is such a thing as too nice, you know, like I used to say, oh, my mom will always tell me that I look good, you know? So don't ask your mom if you look good, right? Because you know that they're always going to say yes. But this is probably the most mild of all of the egregious ones. In order to achieve radical candor, you have to care enough about the person to challenge them directly so that they know that you don't mean them any harm, you mean them help. I was told actually earlier this morning by someone I trusted that I knew cared about me, that, you know, brought something to my attention and says, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, but X. Because I knew they were trying to help the outcome, okay? But they only had permission to be that direct because we established a relationship first. This is really tough for any of you who has direct reports. Are there anybody here who manages people in the room? Anybody? A couple of you? Cool. So imagine though, that the power was inverted. You don't have any power. Your boss has the power. How do you deal with that? Right? You have to go out of your way to figure out what they like, what makes them tick, and not be a schmoozer. Just figure out when they have a good day, when they seem to be in a good mood, why is that? You know? And then over time, just demonstrate that you paid attention, that you care about them as a person, not as your manager, but as a person. And that's difficult because maybe I just really don't care about that person. This is interesting to me. Because when I think about the fact that someone doesn't like me, or vice versa, it's usually because we haven't taken enough time to figure out how to communicate. And if you don't work on this, you're going to have a really hard time as an employee. Yes, it's really tough when you have to manage up, but that's sometimes what you got to do. Another thing you need to do is truly open your connection, right? Does anybody know what the strongest communication style is? Anybody have any guesses? No? Speaking is only 7% effective. Words are 7% effective. Your vocal tone, like the way that I'm speaking, is 38% effective. But the most effective is your body language. Okay? So if you talk to somebody and you're like this, you look relaxed, you also look closed off, right? Especially if you talk to them while you're typing. This is a bad habit of mine. Talk to them while you're typing and you're not actually looking at them. Even though you're being cheerful and everything like that, you are demonstrating to them that whatever they're saying to you is not that important that you would actually have to look up and look at them when you're speaking, okay? So that subconsciously sends the message that you kind of bother me, I'm kind of busy, but I'll talk to you because you're my boss, okay? I know it's annoying because every time we take a break from the screen, we have to reset our context and it takes us a little bit to ramp up, but it's important to stop and look at the person. Another trick I've learned is to get down on their level or up on their level. Don't be sitting down when they're standing up, stand up to meet them. If they're sitting down, then sit down with them. Try to be at the same level because it shows that you're attempting to care. So I just came back from this weekend going to New Zealand. Not nearly as vast as this country, but it was interesting to me to be able to experience a little bit of the indigenous culture there and how two different tribes would like meet up and try to figure out if they're friend or foe. And it was like this huge ordeal. It was all this stuff, and it was a really big deal, like the way in which they met each other. And the concept of like touching noses and the side of your shoulder and breathing together, and then sure, you can come in and have dinner with us. I'm like, why is that important? Even though I didn't understand any of the words, it was very obvious what was happening from their body language. As primitive as that is, we think we're really advanced, but we're pretty primitive beings after all, okay? I can watch entire shows in Spanish, which I don't know the hoot of, and try to kind of figure out what is happening in the drama, okay? It's pretty fascinating. So pay attention, just be aware of what you're doing with your body and how open that you're being. Okay, you can make this a habit. There's a wonderful story that I was told just last year about the concept of learning empathy. So one of my friends was convinced that you're either born just loving the world or not. You find it scary, or you find it annoying or frustrating. And I would argue we're already born crying, so we're probably all frustrated right away. So how do you create this habit? Children learn habits based on what their parents are doing or their caretakers are doing, right? So we're all sitting on a plane, is the way the story goes. And sure enough, right after takeoff, you got the shrill sound of a baby scream. Yay. This is why I have nice noise-canceling headphones. But everybody was reacting differently to that. My reaction was, I would like to sleep on this flight, turn on noise-canceling, right? That's my reaction is, that's annoying, I want to block it out. Some other responses that people could be seeing on their face was sympathy for the parent of the child who had to try to calm the child down, who's clearly in pain from the ears getting all stuffed up, right, as they're ascending. And other people were so annoyed by it that they would physically get up and like walk away and try to go to another seat. So there was all these different reactions, right? And then there was a little 4-year-old boy who kind of wiggled out of his seat and walked down the aisle to where the little baby was and dug through his little backpack and handed the baby his little pacifier. Because he figured, well, whenever I cry, this makes me feel better. So here you go. That was his reaction. And that young, you can be taught empathy, right? So I was told once that children are selfish. They don't really care about anybody but themselves because they don't know how to do that. But it can be taught very, very young. It was interesting that that was the only one on the entire plane that actually felt like, well, they're clearly suffering. maybe I can do something about it. And while this might sound like a story about just being a good person, it's not. It's about the fact that he had to experience empathy to know what to do about the situation. So when you don't know what to do with your manager or your peer, you have to find some way to empathize with them to know what to do. You have to be able to experience a little bit through their eyes or through their shoes. And that's hard for me. I don't have any kids, so that's a little difficult, right? But I am an aunt of many, many, many kids, okay? So when I do talk to my sisters, I try to ask them a little bit more about it so that I can relate to my peers who do have kids to go pick up at 3 or 4 in the afternoon and they can't stay and deploy and I need to stay and deploy something for them. You know, I have to think about what they would be going through even though I didn't personally go through it. Because once you learn why someone is behaving the way they are, then you can generate that empathy. If they feel heard and they belong, you've met them on their terms. That fosters a feeling of safety for that person, regardless of the power difference, by the way. Your manager has to kind of feel safe with you. I know that sounds weird, but having been a manager before, I can tell you that there are employees that I felt like I could just be candid with because I knew that we had an understanding, right? I could be a human being with them and not their manager because I felt safe with them. You can control that. And vice versa. If you're a manager, you've got, in a way, that power is not really a good thing to have because then people feel automatically obligated to just tell you whatever you want to hear. You need to take an active interest in who they are and what they do, okay? Because with safety comes trust, right? And with trust comes the ability to have radical candor with one another. With open communication brings ability. And with the social ability plus your technical ability, then you can perform in a way that is habitually going to make you stand out. You progressively become better and better at understanding that empathy. And once you have this feedback loop in place, what you can build together successfully is the force multiplier that can make or break your career. That's kind of what I decided to call it. It was like a force multiplier loop. This is a while loop, yes. And this works. Because once you've got this loop in place and you just kind of got it automatically going, you can like 10x your career, you can 10x your happiness, all these things, and you can have a huge amount of impact to multiply that impact. Because people will forget what you said and they forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. Never. And I'm sure all of you remembers that one manager or that one developer you worked with that was great but a jerk. You always remember that. And you also remember the one that you loved to work with. Another role that you can take on to getting noticed is to externalize thought leadership. This right here, what I'm doing right now, is an example of externalizing thought leadership. I'm speaking outside of my job. This has nothing to do with my job. And I'm demonstrating that I'm a thought leader in this space. You can do this at a user group. You can do this anywhere. It could be as small as a couple of groups of people at high school, or it could just be across the internet. It doesn't have to be in person. But externalizing the thoughts that you have in place and the opinions that you have is incredibly important and to be able to stand out. You know why? Because a lot of people don't do it. There's a lot of people who are intelligent and smart. Like I have a really bad time doing a blog. I'm just not a blogger, but I'm a YouTuber. So it's a different way of externalizing the thought leadership, but it's very effective. So I recognize that I'm just not a writer. I don't like writing. It's not my thing. I could get better at it if I decided to really focus on it, but I have also discovered I can be just as effective, if not more, in a different type of media. Okay? Which, by the way, if you're interested, it's called The Hello World Show. It's on YouTube. Check it out. This was really hard for me to learn. Working hard and doing a good job is just not enough. Promotion in big companies of any scale is about leadership and in many cases management, because you're going to get paid really well if you work hard and do a good job. You know, you just won't get promoted and go all that far. You'll get well paid, but you won't get well recognized. You have to lead by example outside of your company, also demonstrates ability. This is really key, by the way. If you're not feeling like you're getting opportunities at your job, present things externally. And then tell your manager about it. Tell your company about it. Usually, it makes them look good that they've got somebody demonstrating that who they have working for them is intelligent enough and as much of a leader that they want to share knowledge. Okay? This is a great way of getting noticed. At one of the jobs I've had before, the saying was, you don't get promoted, you leave the building, knock on the outside, and change your suit. And I thought that was such a odd phrase, but then I kind of get what they're talking about. In order to really get noticed as somebody who could take the company in a different way, you had to be different. You had to show them that outside of your normal job. Now, that isn't always the case, but if you don't feel like your situation is fair, make it fair. Make it fair for you. Sharing your knowledge with places outside of your work can put you on the fast track. And the big one, why you should network. So it's awesome that you're here and you're learning something, but the most important track that you'll have at this conference is the hallway track. So as you're walking around in between sessions and tonight at the attendee party, make a point in meeting different people. It's uncomfortable, it's weird, but luckily for us, we're all at a tech conference, so it kind of goes without saying that we all know that we're a little strange, right? It's totally fine. Say hello, you have no idea who you're gonna talk to. I said hello to somebody once at a conference last year. Turns out they worked for one of the big 5 on one of my favorite platforms, and I got an opportunity to kind of build a little proof of concept for them, and it got published. Pretty cool. And that was just from a hallway conversation. Oh yeah, I like to do this stuff. And otherwise, how would they have found me? Happenstance? You have to kind of make the odds in your favor. Having a large and valuable network is a fantastic asset for advancing your career and your life in general. Even if things aren't going to work out at this current company, that is a wonderful way to not panic if layoffs start happening or you realize that the current job is just not for you. You are going to rely on your network to not just be someone to speak for you, but to also find opportunities that can be a direct link instead of you going through, the 2 to 3 month back and forth with a recruiter and eventually getting an opportunity to get in front of a manager. It's a great way to do it. It's probably one of the most valuable things you will ever learn in your tech career is how important networking is. And it doesn't mean what you think it means. So when most programmers ask me about networking, what they're really asking me about is how they can use people to get what they want. Okay? I'm not about that at all. In fact, my personal philosophy, and the one I firmly believe you have to have true success, is to figure out how you can give as many people as possible what they want, or even better, what they need. And think about it first. There's a book, I believe it's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. I haven't read all of it, but I understand that this saying is an excerpt from it, is that if you want to have a connection with somebody who's very well connected, then you have to do something for them first without them even asking. Or, better yet, ask them if they wouldn't mind helping you out with some small favor, and then suddenly you feel like you have a connection. Because if it's an easy thing to fulfill, and they said, sure, no problem, now you actually have something you can talk about for at least 5 minutes, right? It's so interesting. The more that I get involved with deep technical knowledge, the more I become fascinated by the human condition, because so much of our world still revolves around human decision-making, conscious and subconscious. Let's think about the wrong way to network. Most software developers only start worrying about networking or trying to network at all when they need something, and it's usually a new job, right? But that is the absolute worst time and the wrong way to build a network. Building a network takes time. Trying to rush the process and do it quickly means you probably reek of desperation and coming off as a sleazy moocher. So just trying to be nice to people so you can extract something from them. We are pretty intelligent and we have good intuition about that kind of a thing. Let's talk about the right way to network, shall we? The right approach to building a network is building relationships. And just like romantic relationships, real business and professional relationships cannot be rushed. Imagine if you met a person you'd like to pursue a romantic relationship with, and on the first date you ask them to marry you. I mean, it has happened. Not to me, but it has happened, right? That probably wouldn't go over too well, And yet many software developers want to approach networking in exactly that manner. Think about the long game. If you need something right now, there is a role for that. It's called a recruiter, and they understand that it's just temporary for this time. You're building that relationship. It's not really a good relationship. It's just a fast relationship, right? But the ones that make the biggest difference in your career are the ones that you play for the long game. Also, network in person. I know it's difficult, especially if there's not a lot going on around your area. So where do you actually go to network? Everywhere. You should always be networking. We are lucky enough to be in an industry that every other industry needs in order to work. Even agriculture usually has some sort of IT component. So you probably can even talk to people in that industry. Once you run into on the street, you'd be surprised how many people I just happen to chat with while I'm in line for a coffee, because you guys don't like Starbucks here, so a coffee somewhere, right? And just started asking, what do you do? What are you here for? And it turns out, oh yeah, we automate this or automate that. I mean, I don't work on that. Some smart IT people do, but that's cool. And then all of a sudden, they remember you as that IT person. So if they ever need one, maybe they'll call you. And those aren't people that are in our industry exactly, but they do have need for us. The easiest and best thing to do in this case is to find groups of people who are interested in what you're interested in, which is why you're here, right? Meetups are great. I use meetup.com all the time. Be willing to put in the time for that. And go to software development conference. So you guys already have a huge tick off your box right there. Even though it's sometimes expensive to come here, it's also great places to meet new quality people and to pick up some training at the same time. Because the point is, everybody at this conference is invested. If it was a free conference, not as much investment, okay? Whether you paid for it, your company paid for it, regardless, there's intrinsic value in the kinds of people that walk through the doors, okay? When you're here, walk around and talk to people and attend different sessions. It's really important that you put yourself out there. While you may not be up here, you need to still connect down there. And of course, the big one, yes, branding and social media. I've worked for a company that does advertising, okay? I've learned this firsthand, that if you don't put yourself out there, nobody knows you exist. It's important to do it. However, I don't really like participating in it a lot and having it be in the front of mind, so I automate a lot of it. You can use Hootsuite or other kinds of things for Twitter, where you can just, if you're up late at night, you can just kind of write a whole bunch of different tweets you're thinking about, maybe something about architecture, maybe something that you think is cool on TV, whatever you want to say, and make sure that you load them up, and then it will, at timed intervals, release them. So you don't have to remember, oh, I haven't tweeted today. Oh, now I'm out of sight and out of mind. You can just trick the system and just preload them, right? It's awesome. It's awesome. You can hire somebody to do this for you, but honestly, with just a little bit of practice, it's pretty easy to do it yourself. Also, don't forget that corporate sites have a different audience. So when I say corporate sites, I'm thinking specifically of like LinkedIn, right? That's much more about the formal position that you hold. So you can have maybe tailored different kinds of comments and responses based on your platform. It's not too terrible. I mean, we have all sorts of levels of abstraction for our software architecture. It's not too different from social media. And you got to be really honest with yourself about who you are. When it comes to creating an authentic personal brand, that means you have to share the good, the bad, and the real with your followers. Aspirational is great, but being relatable is what creates connections. For example, if for any of you who paid attention, I've been reading my notes as I go because I have an awful memory. And it's okay that I said that to you because it's relatable. Because lots of people forget stuff. And while I might feel, and I did for many years, that it's a detriment and people think less of me for it, that's actually not the case. That's not something that I can help, but I can put things in place to make me effective regardless. And being open about the habits I put in place actually does create that connection. It absolutely does. Even one of the really big higher-up people at Microsoft that I follow even recently said that, well, I thought that they weren't all that special or that important, but then somebody said, oh, wow, you got up and you did a talk and you weren't feeling well and it was obvious that you had to check your blood sugar levels like right on stage, and that actually really affected me because I realized that my kid who was coming up in the world, I was worried about whether or not they could have a career in the things they love, but here you were demonstrating that you still gave your talk and still talked about all this, and clearly it's possible. Even though he at the time felt like, gosh, this is so embarrassing that here I am on stage and I have to check my blood sugar levels because I'm a diabetic, right? When really it actually was even more impactful in a good way. Now, there is a caveat to this though, okay? You can be relatable by being a bully. That's not the right way to go. I'm not saying that because I want you all to be Mary Poppins and lovely, okay? Be yourself. Don't be a jerk. Don't be a jerk on social media. It will haunt you forever. Don't do it. If you have all these problems and thoughts, make sure that you talk to someone about it. Just don't talk about it on the internet, okay? It's a pretty decent guideline that lots of people don't follow. So try to be someone who follows it. I promise it'll be a lot better for you in the long run. So you got to post with purpose. Don't just spam a bunch of things. It's really cool when somebody shares pieces of real thought processes. And you can tell right away whether or not they were just some headlines that they snagged and then retweeted, or it was something genuinely from them. You have to avoid all that filler content. I used to stress out if I didn't share with my online audience every day. Okay? Every day. So I would search for something, anything to keep the engagement going and put me in front of people's faces. It's exhausting. Like here I am, doing extra time trying to further my skills outside of the job that already is more than 40 hours a week, and now I'm trying to also become my own salesperson, and it was just a lot. Filler content, though, wasn't giving my audience the best of me. And it didn't come off as authentic or genuine. It came off as filler, and it came off as fake. So now, before I post anything online, I ask myself, what purpose does this serve? How am I actually connecting to anybody? Does this even contribute to my personal brand? I didn't even really like that phrase. What is personal branding? What does that even mean? I feel like I made my own logo and stamped it on my forehead. It's so weird. But it's true. When people think of you, what do they think? You can control that. I know it seems like you can't, but I promise you can. Even large companies right now are proving that as long as they show a genuine side of them, things will work out all right. I even think last week, a shoe company just kind of put out what they believed. It was controversial, but in the end, people still respected the fact that they were willing to get behind whatever they said, right? And their stock ended up going up because that was genuinely a position that they felt. It was a risk, but it totally paid off. And speak like a human being. My advice for developing your tone is simple, and don't overthink it. I speak to my audience the way I would speak to a friend, or if you were in my living room, you were having a cup of tea. This is exactly the same way I talk. If you come and see me tonight at the attendee party, it'll be exactly the same. I'm informal and I'm upbeat. You want people to relate to you and feel like they know you. It helps to develop that trust, especially when they're not in front of you. Okay? It's better when you do have something to promote, once they have almost like that offline candor, that way your readers don't feel like they're being fed such an ad, such an advertisement, but rather an exchange of information between friends. Even though clearly you don't know each other very well, if you speak to them as if they're already welcomed in your circle, you know, that whole, you're already welcome in the tribe and you're already welcome to dinner. If you speak to people like that, they instantly relax and there is an unspoken trust that starts getting generated. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, like when a speaker walks on stage at a TED Talk and they say the first 5 or 6 words that comes out of your mouth, you know whether or not you're gonna like them. Is it delivery? Is it DiGiorno? I don't know. Is it the way that they look? Is it the tone of voice? The answer is yes, all of the above. It is the way that they delivered something because they thought about how do they want to make you feel. You can be a really effective speaker and walk out here and say something that jars everybody right away. It's really effective for people who are trying to teach someone a lesson or, you know, really bring a lot of attention to like crime or violence or something like that. But in general, you want to be inviting when you speak to people. Be moderately responsive. So social media has the word social in it for a reason. It's in order to grow your personal brand, you need to nurture your community and respect your readers the same way. Create conversations and answer questions and encourage the discussion. I mean, Stack Overflow is a great forum for this due to the searchable nature of that. You don't need to engage every second of every day, just do it with a small amount of consistency so you don't miss engaging opportunities. Of course, if you're on vacation, you're on vacation. But just try to reach out habitually. It becomes easier over time and you can do it in smaller and smaller windows. Because remember, if you aren't online, you are out of sight. Whether that is a placeholder like profile or you actually actively having a conversation back and forth, you're out of sight. And this whole purpose is, right, to be visible. Use it to your advantage. You could be the best developer in the world, but without someone taking notice, the opportunities to advance will not come. They won't come. Why leave that in the hands of someone else to do the work for you? If you're lucky, someone really cares and is like, hey, you should give this person a promotion, but that's not normally what happens. It's not that it never happens, but it doesn't normally happen. Take control of at least having a crafted image so when people search for you, they get a sense of what it would be like to work with you. And I mean, I post on social media knowing that I work at a company that can read it, right? So I keep that in mind that I'm also kind of exercising, this is who I could be if you just gave me that promotion. See, look at all this wealth of information that I'm putting out there. Look at all this external thought leadership, right? That is your permission to stretch your wings a little bit without being demanding directly at your job. It matters. So why does attitude matter? I mean, I believe skills can be taught. I believe empathy can be taught. I don't think attitude can be taught. If you care, I can teach you. If you don't care, I can't teach you. So attitude does matter. Almost one of the first things that most managers think about is whether or not they can tolerate you in that new role. It's like, well, if I give this person power, is that a good thing? You know, it's a good idea to have power. I travel a lot all over the world, and I oftentimes will compare and contrast the differences going through border crossings and customs and security with all of the different countries. I personally think that some of the friendliest people I've ever met in my life doing security are at your airport in Sydney. They're really cool, very nice. Now, I come from a country that doesn't traditionally have that kind of a thing going on, but sometimes they do. And I always make it a point to like stop and say, who's the manager on? And say, this person was great. Like they did their job, but they didn't make anybody feel uncomfortable. They were smiling. They were just asking, how was your day? You can still be professional and be a human being. And I appreciate that. And it seemed like almost everybody I came across, both times I've been to Australia, was always just like, hey, oh, don't worry about it. You just go over here. And nobody was yelling. It was great. I loved it. And so if somebody were to ask, you know, where do you want to Where do you want to stop over? Where would you like to go through? It makes me go, well, which security would be the least painful for me to go through and the most pleasant and enjoyable? I'm going to pick Sydney. That's what I choose. So this is where I want to connect through, right? That is exactly the same kind of thing that happens to a manager when they're trying to figure out, who do we want to give this responsibility to? I know it's kind of a silly thing to correlate, but that we already have so much going on as humans. We don't want to make it harder. Your attitude absolutely matters. And if you have a bad one, fix that first before having the expectation that you're going to be visible. Because life isn't fair. We would love to be a meritocracy, but we're actually not at all. We are trying to go towards that, to where the code you produce is what differentiates you from a good or bad developer. But that's not the reality of the situation. We judge the human connection even before we judge their code. The day I learned to accept this fact, as hard as I may try, some things are still out of my control, okay? I could learn to make coffee, although I'm still an amateur, but what I really need to do was change my attitude. Like, making coffee, maybe placate someone, because look, I'm showing them that I care that they're grumpy in the morning. But if I'm still also grumpy with them, it's still not gonna help the situation. All you've done is introduce caffeine to the situation, which sometimes improves things, but have you ever been the person who got their 4th cup of coffee and you're still grumpy? Yeah, the attitude really does matter. So now when I wake up and I'm really jet lagged, which happens here a lot, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just want to sleep a little longer, I just feel so grateful that I'm not home and I get to do something different with my day. So I drag myself out of bed and go, I just need a cup of coffee to feel like a human, and I tell myself that after I get to like my 5th cup of coffee, right? But really, to feel human is kind of like you have to make a choice, okay? It has to be a choice. Is anybody here a parent? Having any kids? Yeah, lots of kids, awesome. The next generation. You just have to make a choice to feed your children even when you don't feel like making food, okay? You gotta make a choice to have a good attitude when you don't feel like having a good attitude. And that sounds awful, but the funny thing about the human brain is that if you do things with your body, you can actually simulate your responses to give you little shots of dopamine based on doing something as simple as forcing a smile. Force a smile, eventually you're gonna get like a little shot of dopamine. That's like the essence of like fake it till you make it, right? Like, I'm just gonna pretend to be happy until I'm actually happy, and it does work. Usually it starts with somebody going, yay, I'm having such a good day. And then you start laughing at yourself, and that laughter actually does trigger a positive chemical response. And then eventually you just feel better. Isn't that cool? I mean, I love science. It's amazing. Computers are amazing, but human beings, man, it's a whole nother level of awesome with the things that we can do with some applied knowledge. And really, that's what you came here to learn today, is how to decode and debug a human being, because that's how you're going to become visible. My own experience in business has taught me that career advancement depends on a combination of factors, right? Your skill, your attitude, your luck, and opportunity. While you can control some of these, others will always be beyond your control. Skill, attitude, luck, opportunity. You have to have all 4 of those to be in that elite group. When I say the elite group, I really just mean the people that come first to mind when you think of this subject matter, or you think of, hey, do you know any awesome people that do microservices? Right away, you're already thinking, right? Maybe you work with them, or maybe you know them online. Do you know anybody that does test-driven development? Who's the first person that comes to your head? Why is that? Probably a combination of several of these. Sorry, you're telling me I gotta wrap up here. All right. To become visible, you have to show others that you see them first. Listening is the most impactful thing you can do to change your career. You might not always like your colleagues, but learning to work with difficult people is essential for moving up, okay? Work on your team building skills and take advantage of opportunities to lead. To become visible, share what you've done often. Utilize those social media outlets to reach outside your company. Sometimes it takes being externally recognized for your internal colleagues to take notice. And to become visible, inspire by example, because passion is really contagious. So you gotta be that without expecting anything in return. You just gotta be that. Don't just be the example of what good work looks like. Let it radiate from you in the attitude that you approach it with. Because then people are gonna want to. It's contagious. They want to do it with you. Reach out first to share with excitement and invite people to the table. Your rise will be a very natural one if you do this, and it is almost always this way. Because if you want to stand out from the crowd, you got to give people a reason to not forget you. Or another way that you could put it is be so good they can't ignore you. But also know that you're good enough and don't hide it. Thank you.